Hi, I'm Dr. Matthew Anderson, and the conversation today is entitled Get in the Boat with Noah, the most powerful survival technique of all. Now, I know that you get hit with videos all the time to tell you, oh, this thing is the most powerful thing in the world. It'll change your life. It'll make you rich. It'll change you physically. It'll heal all your ills. A lot of that stuff really is good. I'm not putting it down. And most of the time, it's not quite what they say it's going to be. And certainly, you just don't watch a video and have your whole life changed. What you need to do is to take whatever you're told, evaluate it to see if it's meaningful, and then put it into some meaningful practice, or else it's going to have no value for you except a few minutes of distraction. I'm hoping that you will really listen to this one, because this one, what I'm going to share with you, is a tried and true practice that really can make a difference in how you get through this crisis that we're in right now and any other crisis that you may have to show up in your life from this point on. It's worked that way for me in a number of crises over the last 50 or so years. Major ones, medium-sized ones, and little ones. It really has helped me. Now, in order to describe it, I need to tell you a story, and then tell you about a book, and then I'll tell you how to put this thing into practice. So it's got three parts, and the first part is the story. Now, in the book of Genesis, which is in Jewish scripture in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, and in Christian Bible, it's also in Genesis, but Christians don't call it the Torah. They call it the Old Testament, which has always been kind of funny to me because it's not old, it's just the beginning. There's a story of Noah in Genesis. He's a man who got visited by God. Apparently, he was a very pious, devoted, religious man. And he had a family, and God came to him and said, listen. Now, remember, this is Matthew's telling the story. The essence of it is true. When you read it, you're going to find it's more detailed than what I'm saying to you right now, but I just want to get to the point. God came to Noah and told him something. He said something that Noah had to feel at that moment was, this sounds absurd to me. Forgive me, God, but this one sounds outside the box of my life. Had to be his first reaction. But since it was God talking to him, of course he had to take it seriously. So God said to Noah, look, I'm getting really, really annoyed with humanity. It is not going the way I wanted it to go, so I'm going to get rid of most of them. I'm going to do it by flooding the entire place, and just about everybody's going to drown except for you and your family. And the way we're going to help you not drown is I'm going to tell you how to build a boat, specifically, all the details, how long, wide, tall, everything. And you're going to build a boat, and you're not going to take it to the ocean. You're not going to take it to a river. You're going to leave it right there in a certain way in your own backyard. And it's going to be really big. And you're going to put your family on it. And then you're going to bring all kinds of animals on this boat, because I want to save them too. I know that Noah must have gone through some kind of internal struggle with this, but ultimately he did what God asked him to do, and God said the most important thing in the whole story was, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to make a covenant with you, which is really an unusual thing in biblical theology. You can read about it if you want. A covenant in this situation meant that God himself was establishing a relationship, an agreement that had a kind of a legal binding nature to it, that if Noah and his people would do what God said and have an ongoing relationship with God, God would protect them from crisis and adversity. And this was the first step in it. They had a relationship. They did what God wanted them to do, and they built the ark. And the rains came, and everything got flooded, and everybody but Noah and his family died. And they were out there on the water for a very long time, and then the water went down, and they built a new life. Now, that's a very significant story. And I heard that story, who knows, the first time I heard it, because I grew up in a very intense Bible-based family. I grew up in South Carolina in a small town, and my parents and everybody I knew were devout Southern Baptist evangelicals, and the Bible was the book, and that was pretty much it. Now, books were around, but they were not in second place, third place, fourth place. They were not even in the same category as the Bible in terms of the way I was raised. And so the story of Noah was one of those stories I heard from the time I was a tiny little boy. And it had big, powerful meaning for me. As I got older, I began to understand it in a broader and deeper and, in a sense, more meaningful way. But it was very meaningful for me from the very start of my life. And then something interesting happened. A little over 25 years ago, I was introduced to an Islamic poet. He was in the sect called Sufism. His name was Jalaluddin Rumi. And Rumi lived in Konya, Turkey for most of his life. May have grown up in Afghanistan. I'm not entirely sure about that. But he has been considered, and still is, the most important spiritual poet who ever lived. He's just absolutely fantastic. And he's gotten a lot of popularity in some different groups in the United States in the past 20, 30 years. And he's a real blessing. And I probably read Rumi almost every day of my life for the last 25 years. Just very significant to me and many other people. But what I want to tell you is, I was reading one of his poems and he has a line. The line was, "Stop swimming and get in the boat with Noah." And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Because number one, it has some really great spiritual, psychological meaning on every different level. But then I started to do a little research, and I discovered that in the Quran, which is Holy Scripture of Islam, there's a story of Noah, which is very similar. It's not identical to, but very similar to the one that's in Genesis. And in this story, instead of having 3 sons that Noah has in the book of Genesis, all of whom got on the boat, the ark, with Noah, Noah has in the Quran 4 sons. And the last son, the 4th son, is named Yam, Y-A-M. I discovered recently that Yam is a Hebrew word for water, which is an amazing, I don't consider that a coincidence. I assume it has some deeper meaning to it. So Yam decides, he says to his father, I'm not getting in the boat. I'm going to climb up to the tallest mountain that I can find on the top of it, and I will be fine. The water will never get up that high. It's just impossible. So he climbs up to the top of the mountain. The rains come, the water rises up. It gets to the top of the mountain, and it keeps going. And he drowns. And in the Quran story, Noah can see him as he drowns. It's a tragic story. Now, the meaning, at least one of the meanings, and I think in these kinds of stories, it's okay to allow it to explore itself in you, in your soul, your heart, and your mind, to see what truth it might bring you to. It has that kind of power. And one of the things I think it's saying, maybe obviously, is don't trust in the material things to get you through when you're in dire circumstances. The mountain, one of the most powerful representations of materiality, was not tall enough. It did not reach up high enough to bring Yam to safety. And his own father watched him die. Now here we are. We're in the midst of this COVID craziness, this thing that we haven't encountered before in our society. And there's an enormous amount of confusion. It feels like the water is rising and we don't know who's going to survive and who isn't. Businesses may end. Some people may have to change them. Some people get it and they actually physically die from this. And other people are debilitated. And the rest of us are running around being scared to death of what we can touch and what we can't. If I touch this, I got to wash my hands and I can never touch my face. It's a craziness. All of us are feeling it. You get on the highway and you know something strange is going on because of how few cars there are out there. It's kind of crazy to me that gas prices have dropped down to almost $1.50 where I live, and I'm not going anyplace. I don't need gas. It's insane. I know many of you listening to this feel the same way, and you're hoping, you're praying. You're looking in your bank account, do I have enough to survive? I'm not going to go on and on about that. You know what I'm talking about, and I know that you're really feeling it on many different levels, and I feel for you about it. And I want to offer you this insight because it works for me. It's worked for millions and millions of people ever since the beginning of relationship covenants with God. Now, what's important is to understand what this, I'm calling it a technique, which is really not the best way to say it. That kind of cheapens it. It's bigger than that. To have a relationship with something greater than us and to reach out to that source which is above the mountain, meaning more powerful, more capable than the materiality of things. I had a client years ago, over 25 years ago. He said to me, Matthew, when I was 30 years old, I looked in my checkbook and I saw I had over $3 million. I knew money would not be an issue for me for my entire life. And he was right. He's a billionaire today. He said, by the end of the day, I was worried about my health. I realized in the morning I had millions of dollars and I was probably going to have millions more. And I felt it in my body, in my heart. I knew it was true. And by the end of the day, I was worried about my health. And that was one of the reasons that he came to talk to me years ago. So when Rumi says, stop swimming and get in the boat with Noah, he's saying to us, you can do that dog paddle thing forever until you wear yourself out and you sink. You can climb up on the materiality of things to try to take care of yourself, make more money, get into your IRAs, find ways to be creative. It's not going to really help in a way that matters. What's he really saying here? We need to find meaning and purpose in our lives in the midst of the crisis, not after, not before, in the midst of it, and that is what will carry us through. And that's what I believe we can say one of the important meanings of that sense of covenant really means. To get in Noah's boat is to access a resource. I'm using a very non-religious word here. is to access a resource that is always there for us, but if we don't establish a connection to it, we don't benefit. We climb the mountain and the water comes up and we're screwed. We are screwed. And we think, I thought I was going to be okay. I thought earning $3 million by the time I was 30 would solve all my problems. That was pretty naive. So, if we establish this covenant, and I'm suggesting to you that you can do it in a non-religious way, meaning you can ask to discover what the meaning and purpose is for you. And before I tell you about how to do that, I want to tell you about the book. There's a book in addition to the Bible. I wasn't talking about the Bible first, I was talking about the Bible story. Now, there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It was published in 1947, 2 years after the Second World War, by a Jewish psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, who survived a concentration camp. And he observed day after day that it was the people who were victims of the Holocaust, who were under the most inhuman circumstances you can imagine. Those people got through this, the ones that got through it with the least bitterness, the most hope, the most possibilities for their lives, were the ones who found meaning and purpose that was greater than their suffering, and they did not do it by holding on to mountains of materiality. For the most part, they connected to God or a greater source. Now, I recommend a book enormously, highly, tremendously. Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, Frankl, is still a big seller. In 1997, when he died, I think there were over 10 million copies that had been sold. I read the book years ago, and I still find it useful to refer to. So what I'm saying to you is, the Bible story says something bad happens, get in the boat with Noah. Don't start swimming out there trying to take care of yourself. Put yourself in a context of something that can truly support you, hold you above the Holocaust, hold you above the hopelessness, the despair, the anxiety, the confusion, the darkness, and carry you eventually to solid ground after the waters have passed. Now, the purpose here is to find meaning and purpose in your personal life and in all that goes on around you. Now, that can be a big task if you're not used to it, if you're not used to seeing it. For me, it's like I swim every day in a sea of meaning and purpose. It's been that way for me almost my whole life. And so I see how it works. It carries me through every difficult situation that I've ever been in. And I'm telling you, in my lifetime, there have been quite a few. In many cases, I thought, this is more than I can stand. But that sense of meaning and purpose, my connectedness to something far greater than I am, that could come in and help me reinterpret, reframe, give me hope, give me possibility, has always been there. Now, I promised I would tell you how to make this happen. So here's the answer. And I know this is going to sound simple, but it's not simplistic. Simply ask for it. Simply ask for it. One of the most powerful lines that I have ever read that Rumi wrote was a line that he wrote about prayer. He said, prayer is an egg. Hatch out the total helplessness within. Prayer is an egg. Hatch out the total helplessness within it. Now, what does that mean? It means the first step towards going towards or finding your own meaning and purpose in life in a way that really is powerful is to admit to and be with your helplessness. Prayer is basically saying, I'm out here swimming in this ocean. I can't do this by myself anymore. I need help. Help me. There's no prayer more powerful, more intimate, more precious than that. Help me. Now, it doesn't matter if you are highly religious, what religion you're connected to, if you're an agnostic, or even if you consider yourself a person who doesn't believe in anything whatsoever. It does not matter in order for this to become effective for you. Because, I'm quoting Rumi like crazy today, he has another line I really love. He says, God accepts counterfeit money. God accepts counterfeit money. What he means is, God doesn't care if you don't believe him. When you reach out to him in that kind of prayer, he responds. She responds. It responds. Whatever you want to call it. You don't have to name it what I named it. It's there whether you noticed it or not. It's always there. And what it requires of us, because there's something very powerful in this kind of spirituality that says it will not enter unless invited. It is a kind of respect for your internal sanctity. You must say, help me. And then help comes from every direction. Sometimes so fast and so powerfully it's hard to believe. And sometimes so subtly, so quietly, that you might walk right past it. So I'm saying, if you want to find the meaning and purpose for your life that will carry you through this crisis and will make you strong enough to deal with whatever crises wait for you in the future, and they do, they're waiting. Imagine that your prayer is like an egg that is hatching out your total helplessness, and simply say over and over and over and over, help me, help me. God bless you.